Well, welcome everyone. This is the second session of our 2021 virtual ICMCI CMC Global Conference. It's our 8th annual conference. We didn't have a conference last year because of the, just everything that we were going through. But this year we decided we can't go without bringing some people together to explore common issues and to learn from each other. So I'm really excited about this year's program. And hopefully next year we'll have some kind of a hybrid conference where we can get together and also invite people from around the world to join us virtually. Just a couple of logistics before I introduce our speaker for this session. The first one, please do keep your microphones on mute. Simply, there's just too many of us to be able to have the online dialogue. This session is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube. So if you miss it or miss part of it, or you really like it, make sure you refer it to a friend so that we will be able to share that information. Please do use the chat function to ask any questions that you might have. I will be your moderator for this session, so I'll be watching the conversation and I'll summarize the questions and get them to our guest. And there is an evaluation. So please, after the last session that you attend, so there's 4 separate sessions, whichever one is your last one, please do complete the evaluation at that point. And for the once you complete the evaluation, you will be asked to give your opinion of each of the 4 sessions, and you get one CPD certificate for each session that you've attended. So you get to learn and you get to book the points for your ongoing professional development. So that's great. So today I am just absolutely delighted here to have with us Mr. Laith Al-Qassem. He's had over 25 years of business and development experience. He's identified and invested in, and he's been involved in over 19 startup companies, and several of which have become great successes. He's a member of the Jordanian Economic and Social Council. He's led and participated in several national economic development initiatives, including Jordan Vision 2020, the national agenda of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and he carries several full-time jobs as well. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Innovative Startups and SMEs Fund. He's the chairman of Arabian Business Councils for Development, and he's the chair of the board of the National Petroleum Company in Jordan. So he's very well experienced and is coming today to talk to us about innovation and regeneration within entrepreneurial companies. So how do they maintain or leverage their success? And then secondly, to give us some insights into how we as management consultants can support entrepreneurial companies to help them leverage their success. So enough of me talking. I'll now hand it over to Laith to give us an introduction. You and I have had a pre-conversation. I'm just delighted to hear some of the things that you have to say, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with our participants today. So over to you, Laith.
Thank you very much, Dwight, and I'd like to thank ICMCI for the opportunity to speak with you, my colleagues. Dwight and I, as Dwight had mentioned, had the opportunity to talk about entrepreneurship and management consulting and sort of the new world in which we're living. And I want to start a little bit with the way I see the world, particularly, I mean, where it is now and post-COVID. So if we take a look at the history of development of humankind, we started off as hunters-gatherers. We then went into the agricultural revolution, where we began curating knowledge of agriculture. You know, how to plant, how to plow, how to fertilize, how to prune, etc., how to harvest. And then we moved on to the Industrial Revolution, where we learned how to organize our work, and we curated all of the tasks needed for that, and then went on to the information age. And the thing that I've sort of concluded out of this is that we are increasingly commoditizing new knowledge as we get more and more experience with the knowledge, like in agriculture or in industry or in information. It gets increasingly commoditized, which leaves businesses having to become more and more innovative to maintain competitive. Companies during the industrial revolution, they eked out additional efficiencies from the way they organized work, whether it be in production operations management or marketing or accounting and finance. All of this now resides on ERP systems around the world, and you don't have to worry about doing what we now call the basics or the fundamentals of management. And that means that managers or business owners, the level of value added and what is expected of them is going above the commodity of management and getting into more innovative spheres for them and their companies to maintain sustainable competitiveness. With that said, if we also take into consideration that the amount of information that the world generates every year is doubling about every 18 months, the ability to learn, and maybe even more importantly, the ability to unlearn what we know from the past, is becoming increasingly important as we try to identify new concepts, new tools, new methods that bring value or can create value in a company, either in its product or its service. How can it be integrated effectively? How can it develop these new products and services? And the lifespan of whatever is being developed is not going to last, 10 years or 7 years. It might only last 2 years. So that ability to continually integrate new ideas and forget what we did 3 years ago and do something new, I think is very important. And I think that's sort of the foundation and the fundamental drivers of what management consulting needs to have to deal with for us to be valuable participants in global economies and with our clients. I hope that was clear, Dwight.
It's absolutely clear. So if I understand, then the commoditization of knowledge at each of these different levels of complexity really creates a new baseline, and everybody is able to come to that baseline quite easily. So the additional success comes with innovation to how do you differentiate yourself from that baseline.
And you have to stretch even further and further from that baseline, and you have to get used to stretching, and you have to get used to integrating, and you will find that I think success will come from integrating from across multiple sectors, multiple disciplines. There's a great story that I like about. I think it was Ericsson, when they were trying to figure out how to optimize the use of cell towers. And they had mathematicians looking at it and they had statisticians looking at it. But it turned out that they got the way that they solved it actually came from an entomologist who explained how ants find the food the fastest. And that's how they send packets. So ants leave the anthill, they go in multiple directions and they drag behind them a scent. And when they find the food, the one that finds the food fastest comes back along the scent, and that trail has double the scent of all the others. And so that is the food that is fastest to get to. It may not be the shortest, but it is the fastest. So this is how the packets of voice data are actually sent around the cell towers. So something from the ant world actually had application in telecoms. I think that's really very interesting. And I think that as consultants, we have to be open. We have to be open to diagonal uses of information, not just linear uses of information.
So I find that fascinating, and we talked about that before, but it's just re-sparking in my mind. Can you say a bit more about what that means to the entrepreneur then? If you're in a sector and you've been successful, but you want to be even more successful, what do you have to do differently than you might have had to do previously?
Sure, I think when I said diagonal development, I think that we've been very used to unidimensional or linear developments within businesses. And so if we take a look at, just as an example, the automobile field, competition to a great extent at the very early stages was based on developing, additional economies of scale or additional efficiencies in what they did. And so whether that was in manufacturing or inventory management or subcontracting or whatever, and then it went into design. And that's how, the Italians with Ferrari and these other high-end cars were doing this. Today, we have manufacturing companies, traditional manufacturing companies, redefining themselves as transportation solution providers. And so it's not that they manufacture cars, they manufacture solutions. And that requires that management and consultants be able to take core competencies of a company and then maybe identify multiple sequential stretches that have to be made in a new direction for companies to be able to differentiate themselves and to continually differentiate themselves. And so that means that both management and consultants have to be, I think, very competent generalists to be able to know what sort of new things are out there and how these new concepts or solutions or ideas can be implemented and integrated within existing definitions to create a new business definition or a new vision or mission for a company. And I think if the consultant or the management is very clever, they will be able to identify multiple steps and will be able then to assist the organization to evolve or to flow into the additional stretches that are there. And I think it's a very exciting time to be a consultant. I think there's lots of very interesting things that can be done.
That's great. I see some questions are starting to come in, but I have to ask this one first, and then I'll start looking at the chat. Could you give us an example of a company that has weathered the COVID storm? We're coming now, almost 2 years of this situation, and thrived. How did they manage to get through an unexpected crisis and thrive as a result?
Sure. You can take a look at. I'll talk about Jordan. Jordan, because of COVID, we had several months shutdown where there was limited motion. It was almost, I don't want to say martial law, but it was you couldn't move. And you had a lot of the food companies here turned into mobile restaurant delivery. And so you had the Uber concept. People who owned scooters were able to get specific licenses to be able to move around, so people could order food. But then that also extended into the grocery field. It extended into all other fields, and so now you're seeing an integration of mobility, information technology, retail, all together, which did not exist 20 months ago or 25 months ago. So this is one. The other thing, I'll use the company that I'm currently managing, the Innovative Startups and SMEs Fund. We're a small group of 11 people. We make investments in funds. We act as a fund of funds, and we also make direct investments in companies. because everybody was stuck at home, we were very thankful for the existence of Zoom. So we were able to have our meetings to discuss the individual investments. We could actually have meetings with the investment committee. We could actually bring in the entrepreneurs into these meetings for them to be able to pitch their companies. Again, 25 months ago, that was all physical.
Mhm.
As of today, this has all become standard operating procedure for us. We very rarely have a physical face-to-face meeting.
Mhm.
And now documents are getting passed around more. People are, and it's very very interesting. And also, we have another company here that was working to help women develop their livelihoods by doing home-based cooking. And in the past, when that was a purely physical business, you had to send a car or a truck or whatever. And now, we have, I don't want to say ladies who are illiterate, but people now are using smartphones, receiving orders, cooking, packaging, delivering via like an Uber or some sort of a shared service vehicle, or a scooter, sending it out, and these women were able to maintain or develop their livelihoods in a much better fashion than if it was physical. So COVID actually unleashed a lot of efficiencies that were there, but they were never obvious because we assumed that we had to operate within a specific physical realm.
Yes, yeah, I see that. Is this these changes during COVID times, are they starting to create a new level of baseline, a new level of commoditization of these kinds of services? If I think to retail, pretty much everybody has now pick up at the curb, or I can log on to their system and see how many are in stock and what's available and what's not. Almost every restaurant has pickup and delivery now when they didn't before. Is it changing the way we're going to be operating in the future?
I do believe so. I do believe so. And if you want to take it even further, one of the things, there was a conference that I attended. I mean, if we take this, you can take this much further. I haven't been part of it, but I'll try to sketch out for you what you see now with 3D printing. Mm-hmm. Now with 3D printing, if I'm sitting at home and I have AutoCAD on my laptop, I can actually design new products. I can email them to a 3D printing center. They can download it, and depending on the type of material I want to use, it can be produced there. If they're a full service 3D printing shop, they might be able to do some sort of testing and come back and say, I suggest you make these changes. Yeah. So I think this is really interesting because it leads to a distributed economy where I can pick and choose. If I'm a designer, I can pick and choose who might retail for me, who might manufacture or fabricate for me, who might package for me, and all of this is being done virtually. And that means that one of the primary skill sets is going to be related to actually finding potential partners that I want to work with them, for me to have my own standards, to be able to vet them, to determine if they can actually work within my own methodology or my own level of standards. And that, of course, leads to other things: global standards for design, global standards for manufacturing. And then the same will go true for packaging and packing and logistics and whatever. So I think there's a whole bunch of different opportunities that exist that have all of the same functions of a traditional productive institution, whether it is manufacturing or that, but the way that it gets delivered is completely distributed. And it only, you start off at a single point, it gets distributed into multiple places, and then it comes back together at a point for retail or distribution or wholesale, whatever that model is. So I think that's very interesting. And of course, the same goes through if, yani, for you to have accounting, for you to have marketing, for you to have HR, for you to have whatever. So I think you're going to end up having centers of excellence that will be able, I can get you the best people, I can get you the best designers, I'll do the accounting for you. So the entrepreneur or the business owner ends up really just being the champion of the idea or the champion of the new sector, with the rest sort of being distributed because of the commoditization and the ease of you communicating with them because of ICT and because of smartphones. The challenge, or I think the coming things that we'll be dealing with is going to be related to standards. Of course, for the consultant's point of view, there's going to be work in standards, but there's also going to be, I think, high innovation for the consultant on how do you organize high performance teams for the short term? How do you motivate people to do this sort of thing, to work for a common goal for a single idea owner?
I love that example. It's, in fact, I've got a client that's in exactly that situation, and I was amazed. They've come up with a concept for a medical device, and they were able to, because of technology and access to all of the things you said, to get to field testing and patent the device in an amazingly short amount of time compared to what it would have taken 3 years ago even.
The other interesting thing, if we're talking about the idea of the owner, you can even have people that you might call the idea of the question. How can I do this better? And so now when you send that out into the ether, you might have 20 or 30 people answering you. And then if you have systems for shared IP, shared intellectual property, then you can actually harvest the best ideas from the world, or harvest components of the best ideas for you to have increasingly innovative and effective products or services that are delivered.
Perfect. That's a perfect segue to a question I have from Sunil here. He says, innovation is about thinking outside of the box. How do you convince clients to accept out-of-box solutions? And while you're thinking of that, just to remind everyone, please do get your questions into the question box. It's a great opportunity to interact here.
I think the most important thing to remember is the competitiveness of companies is not from reacting to change, it's by creating the change. And change is very limited within the box. And when I spoke earlier about diagonal development, it's a synonym for out of the box thinking. I think it's going to come from taking knowledge and concepts from across sectors and trying to apply it there. And I think, I don't want to say it this way, but the proof of the pudding will be in which companies are still standing and which ones are not. And then you're going to ask why. And the why is going to be because they did something different. They might have done it better in the short term, but I think the long-term longevity of clients, we as management consultants, is going to be because they do something important differently.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'm just taking that in because I think that's very insightful. It really is. It's about how do we convince them to survive almost, because if you're not thinking in these new ways, you're not going to be as successful as you were previously.
It's if I want to, maybe the out of the box issue is a good descriptor, but I think if we take into consideration the speed of change, it's not really out of the box, it's ahead of the wave. You want to be ahead of the change. You don't want to be behind the change, because change will overtake you and drown you. If you're within the change, that's that's survivable. If you're ahead of the change, then you prosper.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question, I think, as consultants that we should try to communicate to our clients is how can they become I don't want to say the masters of the change, but at least the champions of the change, the proponents of the change.
Mm-hmm. When we talked in preparation for this this session, you talked about the permanence of change and the impact on entrepreneurs. Could you explore that for us a bit more just now?
That's really, yes, I'll try. Look, I'll give an example of realizations. I don't want to say change, but changes of direction. Many years ago, I was a founder of a company that started working in e-education, but this was before the days of the internet. So this was in the very early 90s. And the driving feature for this was that the speed of change is so high that any company that has the ability to internalize continuous learning, I think this remains true till today, will have a competitive advantage over other companies. And so if you can find a way to transfer knowledge and concepts to people more effectively and faster than in other areas, then you're likely to have a more sustainably competitive company over the long term. That requires you to be able to develop learning materials and to use ICT that you can integrate multiple components: sound, text, images, graphics, videos, animation, movies, interactivity, testing, all on one platform. And this company worked on the banking sector because there's high turnover, employee turnover in banks. And the interesting thing is banks all operate according to the same commoditized set of rules and regulations. And so what one bank does for letters of credit, the other bank does exactly the same thing. You can't have a bank that is off the farm or sort of operating independently of the rest of the banking system. And so that was quite successful. And then we began realizing we did banking and we did other things, English as a second language and that. But then we began realizing that learning is just a specific form of directed communications. So here's your first realization. So your ability to do animation or to do film or to do sound are exactly the components you need to do, let us call them informational videos for companies or informational CDs for companies. So we got out of learning for the purpose of professional development into teaching clients about why you should go with company A or company B. So you had to use these new technology tools to do this. And then after a couple of years doing that, we said, well, we could use the same thing and start using the same components to go into entertainment. And so we began working on animated series and cartoons and whatever. And so this all started from something very, very early, with education. And then that went into other things, many other things. So here was change brought about by realizations of if I reformulate using the same components, I can get product 1 or product 2 or product 3 or product 4. All of the separate components, the components themselves individually are the same, but the outputs in the markets I serve are completely different. So I think that is really the most meaningful change because it has a direct, I'll call it a technology market link. But of course, along the way, you had to deal with changes in standards in software, changes in standard in music and sound engineering, changes in whatever. So you're actually trying to manage multiple dimensions of change, not only a technical one, but the person who knows how to sell educational software is not the same type of person who can sell a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are changes within the institutions, how you sell, who you sell to, who your target market is. So you're dealing with a very nebulous thing, and yet your core competencies are all the same. I believe management consulting is going to be exactly the same. You have a lot of very interesting core competencies. How you reformulate them and how you stack them or put them together will lead to different products and different services that we will be able to provide to our clients. And I also think if we're very bright and we have some sort of a sense of where the world is going to, consultants, I think, have very fundamental skills, which I think is extremely important. If you have very good fundamentals, you will be able to evolve, to create new change, and to address existing change. I hope that, I mean, I've tried to answer that.
You did, and in fact, you led into my next question, because I love the example, and it's much clearer now. I can see how that all holds together, and the importance to organizations and the impact on consultants. So for the perspective of management consultants, I would love if you could explore that a bit more. So how do we stay ahead of the curve? How do we ensure that we're not drowning in the chain? You know, what in the change? I'm sorry. What are some kinds of things that we should be doing as a profession?
I think it's extremely important that all successful consultants have very strong fundamental skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't want to, fundamental skills in business, fundamental skills maybe in some technical things. I'm not a big, so I think that's extremely important. I also think that consultants, their ability to learn new things, I think is very important. The fundamentals give you a learning framework, and they give you the foundations to understand new things. I think we've all gone through things that got in vogue for a couple of years, and then we spent lots of money attending training courses and whatever. We were able to harvest that for about 2 months or 2 years, and then a new fad came, and we all had to jump on that bandwagon. So if you have the fundamental skills, I think the ability to internalize the change and to see what's going on and to see where these new changes can have use will be very important in what you present to your clients. And I also think your ability to forget the old is extremely important. Sometimes we become slaves to what we did in the past because it was very difficult for us to begin to understand what we did in the past. And the amount of effort that we put created a sense of value in ourselves, that this must be really important because it took me such a damn long time for me to understand it. And after a while, it just might become irrelevant. So you need to walk away with the general lessons from what it is that you learned, but then move on to something else.
Yeah, excellent. I've got a question here from Adelwyn, and we're going back to the entrepreneurial side of the equation here. What are some of the barriers to access of the capital and investments required by some of today's startups? What should these businesses or organizations do differently?
This is very interesting. And when I joined the Innovative Startup and SMEs Fund, the most interesting thing, we have very vocal entrepreneurial community here. And everybody kept complaining that there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. and I'm sitting on a $98 million fund. I'm saying, no, there is money.
Mhm.
Okay. But you need to ask the question, why aren't you able to attract the funding? And I think a very important thing that entrepreneurs and funders face is that funding entities or venture capital funds are looking to buy institutions. And by institutions, I mean functioning organizations that have, defined operating practices and authorities, defined marketing channels, defined target markets, production techniques or production outsourcing. They have business development services, they have audited financial statements, they have a well-functioning accounting department or finance department. This is what higher level, Series B or Series C venture capital funds look for.
Mhm.
And then you look at the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur is trying to sell you his or her innovation and the uniqueness of their idea. And that's well and good if you're talking to angel investors and if you're talking to seed investors. But once you start talking to Series A and Series B and Series C investors, what the entrepreneur is selling or trying to sell is not what the fund is buying or what the fund is investing in. And so I think that the access to capital issue can be addressed if the entrepreneur understands very clearly that what he needs to present depends on the fund that he's presenting to and what level that fund is. And one of the problems that we've faced is that there are many successful startups that we see where the entrepreneur now owns 11% or 8% of the company, and multiple venture capital funds own more, because the value adding effort that should have been done by the entrepreneur in building the institution was not done.
Mm-hmm.
And because they were selling, the venture capital companies could actually see that the entrepreneur is good and the idea is good, but the institution is weak. So instead of paying $50 per share, they would offer 20 and get a larger percentage of the company. And if that happens multiple times, then the entrepreneur loses out. Mm-hmm. And that's and this is something that I spoke to the ecosystem. They all said that I was wrong. And then because we act as a fund of funds and we started investing in other funds to come and invest in Jordan, what the funds that we invested in were telling us is exactly what we had predicted previously, is that you have, as an example, you have excellent technical entrepreneurs, but they are not backed by management. And if they've been around for 6 or 7 years, mm-hmm. and they have not developed or have not institutionalized their company, then they have technically failed, but they have technically succeeded, but managerially failed, mm-hmm. in developing their companies. And this is something that I think all entrepreneurs need to understand from the very beginning, that they need to evolve, their role needs to evolve as their company evolves. And if they don't, then they will sell themselves short. And there are plenty of examples of that has happened.
Excellent. I just had a question come in from Abdul Salam. In terms of the consulting industry, is it at the same pace of current technology, fast changes? And in the future, what do we need to do as consultants to be ready for future changes?
I think if we're going to be, thank you for the question, first of all, but I think it would be, you need to straddle, you need to be able to do both. If your house is not in order from the beginning, then there's a lot of old things that need to be done first. Anybody who's been involved in an ERP implementation, and particularly ones that haven't worked, will understand that the fact that the company did not actually develop a paper-based ERP system that people implemented and got their hands dirty with, and understood how it functioned. When you're happy with that, then you can automate. To say that you're going to automate something and the people don't understand the fundamentals or the basics, it becomes extremely difficult for you to fix that problem. So there are a lot of challenges that companies face that are very fundamental, that required the foundation knowledge that I had explained a few moments ago. So that's to make sure that you have a solid foundation to build on. And going forward, I think it is important to understand about what change is occurring today, but I think it is more important to understand the implications of what that change is going to lead to. Because you have to prepare the companies for the impact of the change, and you also have to prepare the companies for where things are likely to go. It's no use, particularly if you give this as an example. If knowledge is doubling every 18 months, and you go to the university, by the time you graduate, 50% supposedly of what you learned will be obsolete by the time you graduate. So you have to actually try to prepare people for maybe the 2 years after graduation, that they will at least have a shelf life, a relevant shelf life, once they leave the university, for them to be effective in the economy. It's the same thing that we need to do with the companies. You have to make sure that they have relevant direction, relevant skills, and relevant objectives beyond the change that we see immediately. It is beyond that for these companies to be successful. And that cannot happen by being linear. You really have to have feelers in multiple dimensions.
That really reinforces, I hadn't thought about it in that way before, but it does really reinforce the importance of management consulting and an optimism for the future, because consultants can be very supportive in helping entrepreneurs and owners of organization in that way. I have another question from Saif El-Din. How do you diagnose the gap for an SME with their bank in financing from your view as a management consultant?
I think banks are an archaic institution. I think banks deal with, at least the banks in Jordan, but I have a feeling that they're genetically very similar around the world. Banks deal with their perception of risk, and maybe the best way to think about this is banks are used to dealing with things that are relatively static and stable. And they have specific characteristics that if your company looks like this, has a cash flow that looks like this, then in our opinion, that you are safe enough for the next 5 or 10 years for you to get a loan. But if we talk about change, let me ask this question. What if the real mindset is, how can you demonstrate to me that you're going to be relevant as a company in 5 years? That's a completely different mindset. You might be doing everything correctly today, but in the next 18 months, you will become, irrelevant as the horse and buggy. And that's why I think that type of mindset in banking is in my opinion, possibly archaic. I think it is archaic. It will have some sort of longevity, because of inertia and because of the slowness with which institutions change.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe that we're going to come into at a point in time where the lens through which banks look at the viability of companies is the wrong lens.
Mm-hmm.
And they might need to change that. And I'm even wondering, and this is sort of own internal thoughts that I've had, is that I don't know if banking is going to continue, or we're going to have institutions that take money and place it with institutions as investments instead of giving out loans. I think that change is just going to be too fast for you to be able to make a prediction on the stability of the company that you lend to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does put a different perspective on things for sure. Here's another question from Sunil, and by the way, thank you all for your questions. India is keen to push entrepreneurship in schools and colleges to encourage self-employment instead of job-seeking graduates. What will attract youth to entrepreneurship?
This is a very interesting question, Sunil, and thank you. But I think it's going to come down to the commoditization of the entrepreneurial path. Is if people understand that that entrepreneurship is a path, not a destination. The problem with the definition, I'm going to group India and Jordan together on this. We believe in Jordan, or in general, that once you find a job, that you have arrived and you've reached the destination, and you just sort of stay there until either until you're fired or die. and that's not sustainable anymore. But that gives a sense of security to people, believing that they can actually enter a job, particularly if it's a public sector job, and avoid taking on the struggle or walking the path of entrepreneurship. I even think that the same way that I was talking with about banks, I don't think that static systems can survive in a dynamic world. And government itself is something that was developed from more or less the late 1600s, early 1700s in the current form. We have computers and we have, smart cards and stuff like that. But even the structure of government is somewhat archaic. So in answer, what will attract youth to entrepreneurship? I think if you are able to explain to them that entrepreneurship goes through 6 or 7 stages. It starts with an idea. At the first stage, you have to test yourself. Are you up to the task? Do you have the required skill sets to develop the idea? And then that's the first set of challenges. The second set of challenges is technical. How can I produce this? How can I get input from the market? How do I determine whether this product or service has value? And would people buy it or not? And then that's the technical challenge. If you're able to understand the interrelationship between yourself as an entrepreneur, the product or service that you're promoting, and the market, the market response to what it is that you want to present, that's your second challenge. And then your third challenge, if the market responds positively to that product or service, it becomes an organizational challenge. How do I develop myself? How do I organize myself to be able to deliver on this product or service promise that I have? And then how do I, that's the first part. And then how do I maintain its relevance? How do I modify it? How do I improve it? How do I innovate it? And then maybe go back and think about what are the fundamental things that this product or service is actually delivering to people. And then you can come up with multiple different types of products, or take a look at the fundamental skill sets that your company has that you've been able to organize, and then how can you recombine these skill sets to create new products. I think if youth understand this, I think their ability to, or desire to go into entrepreneurship will increase. I think the current explanation of entrepreneurship is lacking, and to many people it seems like either black magic or gambling or something like that, and only a very few lucky people do it, which is in fact the case. But I think if you're able to structure a path, and explain the stages of evolution or development, I think youth will more likely go towards it, because there is some level of security in knowing that somebody has a semblance of an idea how to be successful at this. Currently, a lot of it, at least the way they communicate it, is black magic. And the reason I say that is, if you look at the serial entrepreneurs, the successful serial entrepreneurs, they've sort of figured out the different milestones that they have to achieve to create a success. I don't think, I don't want to say I don't think it's difficult, I just don't think it's been communicated sufficiently to our youth.
That's great. Those are great insights. Thank you. I have another question for you. I just want to first thank Hadis Nazari for her comment and contact information. I'm so glad you could join us, and all, please do feel to use the chat in this way to share information. This is all about networking as well. The next question I had for you is a slightly different direction. Well, maybe not. It's about entrepreneurial organizations. What would you see as the future for entrepreneurial organizations? I think you started down that path a bit already in terms of talking about how we can help students understand how to get into it. But for those who are in that space now, what is the future bringing for them?
Just to clarify, when you say entrepreneurial organizations, you mean companies that are entrepreneurial, or do you mean things like ICMCI as an entrepreneurial organization? An association entrepreneurial organization, or a company entrepreneurial organization?
Well, I guess both, but let's start with, we've been talking about private sector up until now, so let's stay with that one. So entrepreneurs more broadly.
I think you have to be open to possibility. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to have a very fundamental knowledge of what drives businesses. And then once you have, and if you've defined that fundamental thing, you will be able to identify where opportunity exists in things that you see happening around you. If it's IT, if it is digital marketing, if it is high intensity agriculture, if it is, I don't know, like Uber, shared services. All of these things are really concepts that got executed, and you just have to be able to identify, to say that this will fit here and this will fit here. We spoke earlier about the distribution of businesses, and that the entrepreneur becomes an idea holder. If quite honestly, if I wanted to establish a new consulting company, and I have my own specific skill sets in something, and then I could actually offer further services if I can find a digital consultant and whatever to work under my umbrella to deliver a product. Because I have to figure out what is that value proposition which I want to deliver. And so I think it is being open to change, I think, is extremely important. And I also think it is going to be open to new structures of organization. And I think management consultants would have a huge role in helping institutions transition from a traditional structure to a new structure. You might keep part of the traditional structure within an organization, but then you could outsource the hell out of it into different areas, as long as it is in alignment with what the business owner or the management or the leadership of that company want to do. Mm-hmm. So I think it is really, I think the skill set that being open to change and open to new structures, and as management consultants, we have to be open to change, and we have to understand the fundamentals really well. And the reason I say that is so many times we see, and I'm sure all of the people who are attending, how many clients have you worked with who wanted you to solve a symptom, not a problem? Mm-hmm. And you will look at it and you say, well, this is because you're doing this wrong. I mean, you're losing money. That's not the problem. The problem is no one's buying. Mm-hmm. Okay. And no one's buying because the product you produce, nobody wants, or it's bad quality or whatever, or you're not communicating, or the last time anybody bought this was 1952. So why are you still producing it? Mm-hmm. There are certain fundamental things that you have to identify, and then once you understand that, then use whatever it is that you perceive around you as a way to solve that. And I know it sounds very nebulous, but there's so much out there. You just have to be aware and clever, and willing to try combinations of things. If I put these three things together this way, would this work? Would this work? Would this work? And that's what I think is needed.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that, and bridging the gap between entrepreneurial and management consulting, which I guess many management consultants are entrepreneurs in their own way. So I have the last question. I realize we're down to our last minute, so maybe just a quick insight. It's Stephen is asking a hypothetical question. Well, maybe not so hypothetical given some economies. What would happen if the internet and various social program platforms were closed or restricted?
I see Stephen and I are worried about what is it? EMP, electromagnetic pulse from the sun. And then if you thank you for that question. It means that if you have a surface understanding and no fundamentals, it means that we're dead. And I think it is very important that we have very fundamental, never displace fundamental knowledge with surface knowledge. And you know, I don't want to say this sounds, there's so much change going on that you cannot possibly become an expert in everything. But if you have a very good fundamental knowledge of things, I think you can understand what's useful and what's not. I don't use a smartphone. Okay, this is my phone. It's the old Nokia one. Because I think a lot of the things on the smartphone disorient you. You get away from the fundamentals. You get sucked into things that are convenient and nice, but I don't want to say not important, disorienting. And for you to undisorient yourself is difficult because a lot of it is addictive. And I sit with my kids who have their face stuck in a smartphone, and I don't have that problem. Yeah. And so they're not paying attention really to what's going out there. Yeah. And when I say fundamental, it's understand what's beneath what we're seeing in a smartphone, or what's beneath what we're seeing in social media. Okay, so that's a very important question, Steve.
It is, and I think that's a great great note to end on. I thank you very much for that, Laith, and I thank you for all of the insights that you've shared with us today. I know time is one of the most valuable commodities right now, so for you to give us of your time to prepare and to sit with us today is very, very much appreciated. I see that Johanna has turned her screen on. She's going to ask us all to turn on our cameras so that we can get a picture for the web. And I do recommend to everyone to follow the link when this is on our YouTube channel, and to share this session with your colleagues, because I know it's great information that will be widely helpful. So thank you again, Laith. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Dwight, and thank you to ICMCI. Rima, thank you, and thank you all for attending.
So thank you all, and do tune in. We've got 2 more sessions left in our virtual conference, and look forward to seeing you at those ones. And thank you again, Laith.
Bye-bye.
Take care, all.
Bye.